The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through room 204 as Mr. Marcus Johnson, beloved third-grade teacher at Riverside Elementary, felt cold steel bite into his wrists. 28 pairs of wide, terrified eyes stared at the scene unfolding before them. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his dark skin as Officer Martinez tightened the restraints. His voice, apologetic, but firm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. We have to follow protocol." 8-year-old Sophia Martinez raised her trembling hand. "Officer, why are you hurting Mr. Johnson? He didn't do anything wrong." The classroom door swung open with a bang. Principal Sandra Hayes rushed in, her face flushed with panic and confusion. Behind her stood Karen Wellington, a thin woman with stringy blonde hair and a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Her son Tyler cowered behind her legs, his eyes darting nervously between his mother and his teacher. "There's been a mistake," Principal Hayes began, but Officer Martinez held up his hand. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call about an assault on a minor. The complainant identified Mr. Johnson as the perpetrator." Marcus felt his world tilting. 6 years he'd taught at Riverside Elementary. 6 years of arriving early, staying late, spending his own money on supplies. 6 years of watching struggling readers discover the magic of books, of being the steady presence some of these kids desperately needed. His own childhood flashed before him growing up in the projects. A single mother working 2 jobs. Teachers who saw potential instead of problems. "Karen, what exactly are you claiming happened?" Principal Hayes asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. Karen stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "I came to pick up Tyler from the after-school reading program, and I saw Mr. Johnson grab my son's arm violently. When Tyler pulled away, Mr. Johnson struck him across the face. I saw it with my own eyes." The classroom erupted in shocked gasps. Several students began crying. Marcus felt his legs go weak, but he forced himself to remain standing. This couldn't be happening. Not to him. Not after everything he'd worked for. "That's not true." Tyler's voice cracked as he spoke. "Mom, that's not what—" "Tyler, be quiet," Karen snapped, her grip tightening on his shoulder. "You're traumatized. Sometimes children block out painful memories." Officer Martinez guided Marcus toward the door. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they passed through the hallway, Marcus caught sight of the bulletin board he'd created just last week. "Reading opens worlds," stretched across colorful paper, surrounded by his students' book reports and drawings. One drawing showed a stick figure with dark skin standing in front of a classroom, with the words, "Mr. Johnson is the best teacher," written in purple crayon. The after-school reading program had been Marcus's passion project. When he'd noticed how many students struggled with literacy, he'd volunteered to stay late 3 days a week, working with small groups. No extra pay, no recognition, just the satisfaction of watching kids who'd once hated reading discover their love for stories. Tyler Wellington had been one of those kids. Quiet, withdrawn, struggling with basic comprehension. Over the past month, Marcus had seen him blossom, raising his hand eagerly during discussions, borrowing books to take home. The transformation had been remarkable. Now, as Officer Martinez led him past the gymnasium where the reading program met, Marcus remembered the afternoon's events with crystal clarity. Tyler had been working on a chapter book about a young detective. He'd gotten frustrated when he couldn't understand a particularly complex paragraph, crumpling up his worksheet and throwing it across the room. "I'm too stupid for this," Tyler had muttered, tears streaming down his face. Marcus had knelt beside the boy's desk, his voice gentle. "Tyler, you're not stupid. This is challenging material, and you're doing great. Let's break it down together." He'd placed his hand on Tyler's shoulder, a gesture he'd made hundreds of times with hundreds of students. Supportive, encouraging, completely appropriate. Tyler had looked up at him with grateful eyes, and they'd worked through the paragraph together. When Karen had arrived to pick up Tyler, she'd been 20 minutes late. Marcus had been helping Tyler pack his backpack when she'd burst through the door, her face already twisted with anger. "What are you doing with my son?" she'd demanded. "Just helping him gather his things. Mrs. Wellington, Tyler did excellent work today." Karen's eyes had narrowed, scanning the nearly empty classroom. Only 3 other students remained, quietly working at their desks. She'd grabbed Tyler's arm roughly, pulling him toward the door. "Tyler doesn't need help from people like you," she'd hissed, her voice low but venomous. Marcus had felt the familiar sting of racism, but he'd maintained his professional composure. "Have a good evening, Mrs. Wellington." 30 minutes later, the police had arrived. Now, as the patrol car pulled away from Riverside Elementary, Marcus caught sight of students and parents gathering in the parking lot. Word was spreading fast. By the time they reached the police station, his phone was buzzing with messages from concerned colleagues, friends, and parents. The booking process was a blur of fingerprints, photographs, and paperwork. Marcus called his union representative, then his sister Angela, an attorney who worked for the NAACP. Her voice was tight with fury when she heard the charges. "This is insane. Marcus, everyone knows you'd never hurt a child. We're going to fight this." As Marcus sat in the holding cell, he thought about his students. What would they think? Would they believe he was capable of violence? The thought made him sick to his stomach. Meanwhile, back at Riverside Elementary, an impromptu gathering was forming in the parking lot. Parents who'd come to pick up their children from various after-school programs found themselves in heated discussions about what had happened. Maria Santos, mother of 2 students in Marcus's class, stood with her arms crossed, her face etched with disbelief. "This is ridiculous. Mr. Johnson is the gentlest man I know. My daughter Sophia loves him. She talks about him every day." "I don't understand how this could happen," added James Parker, whose son had been struggling with reading until Marcus's program helped him improve dramatically. "Mr. Johnson has been nothing but supportive and encouraging." Principal Hayes emerged from the building, her face grave. The crowd immediately surrounded her, demanding answers. "What I can tell you is that we're taking this matter very seriously," she said carefully. "Mr. Johnson has been suspended pending investigation. The district will conduct a thorough review of the allegations." "What allegations?" Maria demanded. "That woman has been complaining about Mr. Johnson since the beginning of the year. She's made racist comments at PTA meetings. This is harassment." Principal Hayes held up her hands. "I understand your concerns, but we must allow the legal process to proceed. I can't discuss the details of the case." As the crowd began to disperse, several parents lingered, forming smaller groups. Text messages and social media posts began circulating. The hashtag Justice for Mr. Johnson started trending on the school's parent Facebook page. The next morning, Marcus's suspension was front-page news in the local newspaper. The headline read, "Elementary teacher arrested for assault on student." The article was sparse on details, but heavy on implications. Marcus's photograph, his professional school portrait, was prominently displayed alongside a stock photo of handcuffs. At Riverside Elementary, the atmosphere was tense. A substitute teacher had been brought in for Marcus's class, but the students were restless and emotional. Many had cried when they'd learned their teacher wouldn't be returning. During lunch, a group of Marcus's students sat together, speaking in hushed tones. Sophia Martinez, one of the most articulate third graders, had taken on the role of group leader. "We know Mr. Johnson didn't hurt Tyler," she said firmly. "He's never hurt anyone. He helped Tyler with his reading every day." "Tyler looked really sad this morning," added Marcus's student, Devin Williams. "He kept looking at Mr. Johnson's empty desk." Tyler Wellington sat alone at a corner table, picking at his lunch. His mother had been very specific about his instructions. He was to stay away from the other students and tell any adult who asked that he was still recovering from his trauma. But Tyler wasn't traumatized. He was confused and frightened. He knew his mother was lying, but he also knew better than to contradict her. At home, Karen had rehearsed the story with him repeatedly, coaching him on what to say if anyone asked questions. As the day progressed, more parents arrived at the school, demanding meetings with Principal Hayes. The school board's phone lines were flooded with calls. Local news stations began picking up the story, and by evening, camera crews were stationed outside the elementary school. Channel 7 News ran a segment titled "Beloved Teacher or Dangerous Predator." The report was sensationalized, focusing on the allegations while barely mentioning Marcus's 6-year record of exemplary service. They interviewed Karen Wellington, who played the role of concerned mother perfectly. "I trusted this man with my child," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "To think that he would use his position of authority to harm Tyler. It's every parent's worst nightmare." The segment showed footage of Marcus being led away in handcuffs, the image looping repeatedly. There was no mention of his after-school reading program, his volunteer work, or the dozens of parents who'd spoken out in his defense. At the county jail, Marcus watched the news coverage with growing despair. His bail hearing was scheduled for the next morning, but the damage to his reputation was already done. The union representative had warned him that even if charges were dropped, the school district might still terminate his employment. His sister Angela had been working around the clock, gathering character witnesses and documentation of Marcus's stellar record. She'd also been investigating Karen Wellington, discovering a pattern of complaints against school employees that raised serious questions about her motives. On the third day of Marcus's suspension, something unexpected happened. Sophia Martinez approached Tyler Wellington during recess, her expression gentle but determined. "Tyler, I know you're sad about Mr. Johnson," she said quietly. "We all are, but I also know you're scared to tell the truth about what really happened." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "I can't. My mom said if I tell anyone the truth, she'll send me to live with my dad." Sophia knew about Tyler's father, a man who'd been absent from his life for years, who'd never shown interest in his son's education or well-being. The threat was clearly terrifying to the 8-year-old. "What if we could help you?" Sophia asked. "What if we could make sure you're safe?" Tyler looked around the playground, then pulled Sophia behind the climbing structure where they couldn't be seen by the supervising teachers. "Mr. Johnson didn't hurt me," he whispered. "He was helping me with my reading, just like always. He was really nice. When I got frustrated, he put his hand on my shoulder and told me I was smart and that I could do it." Sophia felt her heart racing. "Tyler, you have to tell someone. Mr. Johnson is in jail because of what your mom said." "But she's my mom," Tyler sobbed. I can't get her in trouble." Sophia hugged her classmate, her own eyes filling with tears. "You're not getting her in trouble. You're just telling the truth. Mr. Johnson taught us that telling the truth is always the right thing to do." That afternoon, Sophia went home and told her mother about her conversation with Tyler. Maria Santos immediately called several other parents, and by evening, a plan was forming. The next morning, Tyler's class was working on a writing assignment when Principal Hayes made an announcement over the intercom. "Students, we have some visitors today who would like to speak with you about internet safety. Please welcome Detective Rodriguez and Officer Kim from the police department." As the officers entered the classroom, Tyler's face went pale, but Detective Rodriguez's voice was gentle as she explained that they were there to teach students about staying safe online, not to ask questions about their teacher. During the presentation, Tyler began to relax. Detective Rodriguez seemed kind and understanding, not scary like he'd imagined. When she talked about the importance of telling trusted adults when something was wrong, Tyler found himself thinking about Sophia's words. After the presentation, as the officers prepared to leave, Tyler raised his hand. "Officer Rodriguez, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetie." "If someone told a lie about a good person, and that person got in trouble for something they didn't do, what would happen if someone told the truth?" Detective Rodriguez knelt down to Tyler's level. "Well, if someone told the truth about something important, they would be helping to make sure innocent people don't get punished for things they didn't do. That's very brave. But what if the person who told the lie was someone you loved?" Detective Rodriguez's expression grew serious. "Sometimes the people we love make mistakes. Big mistakes. But helping them fix those mistakes is actually a way of showing love. It's never wrong to tell the truth." Tyler looked around the classroom at his classmates' faces. Sophia gave him an encouraging nod. His other friends looked at him with hopeful expressions. He thought about Mr. Johnson, who'd been so patient with him, who'd helped him discover that he actually was smart enough to read difficult books. "I need to tell you something," Tyler said, his voice barely above a whisper. "About Mr. Johnson." Detective Rodriguez sat down in a small chair next to Tyler's desk. "Okay, Tyler, you can tell me." The classroom was completely silent as Tyler began to speak. He told Detective Rodriguez about the afternoon in question, about how Mr. Johnson had helped him with his reading, about how gentle and encouraging he'd been. He explained how his mother had arrived late and seemed angry, how she'd grabbed his arm roughly and pulled him from the classroom. "Mr. Johnson never hit me," Tyler said, tears streaming down his face. "He never hurt me. He was helping me. He's the best teacher I've ever had." Detective Rodriguez's expression was grave as she listened. She asked gentle questions, allowing Tyler to tell his story without pressure. The other students in the class sat in stunned silence, some crying quietly. When Tyler finished, Detective Rodriguez thanked him for his courage. "Tyler, you've done something very brave and very important. Sometimes telling the truth is hard, but it's always the right thing to do." Within hours, Tyler's recantation had set off a chain of events that would change everything. Detective Rodriguez immediately contacted the district attorney's office, and Marcus's attorney was notified. The charges against Marcus were dropped that afternoon, and he was released from custody. But Karen Wellington wasn't finished. When she learned about Tyler's statement, she flew into a rage. She arrived at the school that evening, demanding to speak with Principal Hayes. "My son has been traumatized and manipulated," she screamed in the principal's office. That man and his supporters have gotten to Tyler. He's been coached to change his story. Principal Hayes, who had been growing increasingly suspicious of Karen's claims, remained calm. Mrs. Wellington. Tyler spoke with a trained detective. There was no coaching involved. His statement was consistent and detailed. "This is a conspiracy," Karen insisted. "You're all protecting that man because of political correctness. I'm calling the media. I'm calling the school board. I'm calling the governor if I have to." True to her word, Karen contacted every media outlet she could find. She appeared on local news programs, gave interviews to newspapers, and even started a Facebook page called Justice for Tyler Wellington. She painted herself as a mother fighting against a corrupt system that protected dangerous teachers. But the community had had enough. Parents who'd remained silent began speaking out. They shared stories of Marcus's dedication, his kindness, his positive impact on their children. They also began sharing their own experiences with Karen Wellington, her racist comments at PTA meetings, her pattern of complaints against school employees, her reputation for causing drama. Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who'd worked with the school district for 15 years, agreed to evaluate Tyler. After several sessions, she concluded that Tyler was telling the truth about the incident and that he'd been pressured by his mother to lie. The school board scheduled an emergency meeting for the following week. The agenda included discussion of Marcus's reinstatement and the district's response to the false allegations. As news of Tyler's recantation spread, Marcus found himself overwhelmed with support. His phone rang constantly with calls from parents, colleagues, and community members. Flowers and cards arrived at his apartment daily. The local teachers' union issued a statement condemning the rush to judgment and calling for reforms to protect educators from false accusations. But perhaps the most meaningful support came from his students. Principal Hayes arranged for Marcus to visit the school before the board meeting. When he walked into room 204, the entire class erupted in cheers and applause. "Mr. Johnson," Sophia Martinez ran to hug him. "We knew you didn't do anything wrong. We missed you so much." Tyler Wellington approached shyly, his eyes red from crying. "Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." Marcus knelt down and pulled Tyler into a gentle hug. "You don't need to apologize, buddy. You were brave to tell the truth. That couldn't have been easy." "Are you going to be our teacher again?" Tyler asked hopefully. "I hope so," Marcus replied. "But first, the school board needs to make some decisions." The school board meeting was held in the largest auditorium in the district. More than 500 people attended, with many more watching the live stream online. The atmosphere was charged with emotion and tension. Karen Wellington sat in the front row with her attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. She'd hired him to pursue a lawsuit against the school district, claiming they'd failed to protect Tyler from a dangerous teacher. Despite the evidence that her allegations were false, she maintained her position that Marcus was guilty and that Tyler had been manipulated into changing his story. The board president, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to address the recent events involving Mr. Marcus Johnson and the allegations that were made against him. We want to hear from all stakeholders in our community." Parent after parent stood up to speak in support of Marcus. They told stories of how he'd helped their children, how he'd gone above and beyond his duties, how he'd made a positive difference in their lives. Maria Santos spoke with tears in her eyes. "My daughter Sophia has learning difficulties. She struggled with reading until she met Mr. Johnson. He worked with her every day, never giving up, never making her feel stupid. Thanks to him, she now loves books. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up, just like Mr. Johnson. James Parker shared how Marcus had helped his son overcome a fear of reading aloud. Mr. Johnson created a safe space where my son could practice without judgment. He built my child's confidence in ways I never thought possible. Even some of Karen's neighbors spoke out against her. They described her as a difficult person who'd made racist comments about Marcus and other people of color in the neighborhood. They painted a picture of someone who'd been looking for a reason to target the beloved teacher. When it was time for Karen to speak, she approached the microphone with defiance in her eyes. "I understand that Mr. Johnson is popular," she began. "But popularity doesn't make someone innocent. My son was assaulted by this man, and the fact that he's been manipulated into changing his story doesn't change what happened." The auditorium erupted in boos and shouts. Dr. Rodriguez had to call for order multiple times. Karen continued, her voice rising. "This is about more than one incident. This is about a pattern of inappropriate behavior that the school district has ignored. I have documentation of complaints against Mr. Johnson that date back years." This was news to everyone, including the school board. Dr. Rodriguez asked Karen to provide the documentation, but she claimed it was in the hands of her attorney and couldn't be shared publicly. Principal Hayes stood up from her seat. "I'd like to address Mrs. Wellington's claims. As Mr. Johnson's direct supervisor for 6 years, I can state unequivocally that there have been no complaints about inappropriate behavior. His personnel file contains only positive evaluations and commendations." Karen's face reddened. "You're all protecting him because you're afraid of being called racist. But I'm not afraid to tell the truth about what he did to my son." At that moment, a woman in the audience stood up. She was elderly, dignified, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who'd lived through decades of real injustice. "My name is Dorothy Williams," she said. "I'm 83 years old. I lived through segregation, the civil rights movement, and decades of real discrimination. I know what racism looks like, and I'm looking at it right now." The auditorium fell silent as Dorothy continued. "Mrs. Wellington, you have weaponized your whiteness against a good man. You have used your privilege to destroy someone's life and career. But more than that, you have traumatized your own child in the process." Karen started to interrupt, but Dorothy held up her hand. "I'm not finished. In my 83 years, I've seen too many good black men destroyed by false accusations. I've seen too many families torn apart by lies. But I've also seen communities come together to fight injustice. And that's what we're doing here tonight." The crowd erupted in applause. Karen sank back into her seat, her face pale. Dr. Rodriguez called for a 30-minute recess while the board deliberated. When they returned, the decision was unanimous. Marcus would be reinstated immediately with full back pay and benefits. The board also announced that they would be implementing new policies to protect employees from false accusations and would be pursuing legal action against individuals who file knowingly false reports. As the meeting concluded, Karen Wellington stormed out of the auditorium with her attorney. But her troubles were just beginning. The district attorney's office had already begun an investigation into her false report to police, and Tyler's father had filed for emergency custody after learning about the psychological manipulation his son had endured. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in front of his third-grade class once again. The students had decorated the classroom with "Welcome Back" banners and had written him individual letters expressing their feelings about his absence. Tyler Wellington was no longer in the class. His father had been granted custody, and Tyler was now living in a stable environment where he was encouraged to tell the truth and express his feelings. He sent Marcus a card that read, "Thank you for being the best teacher ever. I'm sorry my mom lied about you. You helped me learn to read, and that's the best gift anyone ever gave me." The after-school reading program was expanded to 5 days a week, with additional volunteer tutors and resources. The community had rallied around the program, seeing it as a symbol of what was possible when people came together to support education and fight injustice. Karen Wellington faced multiple legal consequences. She was charged with filing a false police report, a felony that carried potential jail time. She was also served with a defamation lawsuit from Marcus and his legal team. Her reputation in the community was destroyed, and she eventually moved to another state. But the most significant consequence was the loss of her son. Tyler thrived in his father's care, receiving counseling to help him process the trauma of being used as a weapon against an innocent man. He continued to love reading and often spoke fondly of the teacher who'd helped him discover his potential. A year later, Marcus was named Teacher of the Year by the State Education Department. In his acceptance speech, he spoke about the importance of supporting educators and protecting them from false accusations. He also emphasized the courage it takes for children to tell the truth, even when it's difficult. "Tyler Wellington is a hero," Marcus said in his speech. "He was put in an impossible situation by someone who should have protected him. But he found the strength to tell the truth and help clear my name. That takes incredible courage for an 8-year-old child." The story of Marcus Johnson became a rallying cry for education reform and racial justice. It highlighted the vulnerability of teachers, particularly teachers of color, to false accusations and the need for proper procedures to protect both students and educators. But for Marcus, the most important outcome was simpler. He was back in his classroom, doing what he loved most, helping children discover the joy of learning. Every day, he watched his students grow and learn, knowing that his commitment to education had been vindicated and that truth had ultimately prevailed. The reading program continued to thrive, serving as a testament to the power of community support and the importance of standing up for justice. Parents who'd fought for Marcus's reinstatement became advocates for other teachers facing similar challenges, creating a network of support that extended far beyond Riverside Elementary. And in room 204, where it all began, children continued to learn, to grow, and to understand that telling the truth, no matter how difficult, is always the right thing to do. The lesson that Marcus Johnson taught through his ordeal would last far longer than any reading assignment, shaping the character of his students and the community that had rallied to support him. The empty chair where Tyler Wellington once sat was eventually filled by another student, another child who needed the patience and dedication that Marcus provided. The cycle of learning and growth continued, stronger than ever, built on a foundation of truth, justice, and the unwavering belief that good teachers can change the world, one student at a time. In the end, Karen Wellington's attempt to destroy Marcus Johnson had backfired spectacularly. Instead of ending his career, she had inadvertently strengthened his position in the community and highlighted the importance of his work. The false accusation had become a catalyst for positive change, bringing the community together and creating stronger protections for educators. Marcus kept Tyler's apology card in his desk drawer, a reminder of the courage it takes to tell the truth and the importance of forgiveness. He knew that his experience, while painful, had made him a better teacher and a stronger advocate for justice. And every day, as he watched his students discover new worlds through reading, he was reminded of why he'd become a teacher in the first place, to make a difference in the lives of children, one lesson at a time.